Dobrý den. I'll be speaking in, I'll be speaking in English, if that's okay with everybody. So give you a moment to put on your headphones. Thank you very much. It's great to be here in the Czech Republic because this kind of event where we're talking about rights and personal freedoms the way we are in an open, inclusive way would probably not happen where I come from, and I've come from a long way away. If it did, this event where I'm from would not benefit from such friendly conditions. Where I live, there is mass surveillance of citizens without their knowledge or consent. Secret courts decide who intelligence agencies can spy on and for how long. Phone companies collect personal data and share it with allied Western powers. Most major media outlets are owned and controlled by political parties and major corporations. There is a virtual media blackout of whistleblower cases. In fact, last night I heard from a colleague who wrote an article about a whistleblower case in the healthcare industry. I can't tell you more about it, but there was a legal threat made against the media outlet to remove from the article the details of the disclosure about what the whistleblower reported to the proper authorities. And the media company backed down to the lawyer and removed the information from the article. So we have a virtual media blackout of whistleblower cases. Journalists and activists are investigated for treason. Whistleblowers have been fired and retaliated against for exposing misconduct, even when they report it to the proper authorities. The courts frequently side with employers who retaliate against whistleblowers because the judges, even labor court judges, think that the rights of corporations outweigh the rights of people. There are virtually no legal protections for whistleblowers, and certainly not for national security whistleblowers where I live. And the country's elected leader, the top leader in the country, is opposed to strengthening whistleblower protections. This is where I live. So to say the least, I'm very much looking forward to listening to what's said here today in Prague and learning from everyone over the next 2 days and taking this knowledge and the awareness back to my home country of Germany. I wasn't talking about the US where I'm from. This happens in Germany. Over the past 4 years, during my time with Blueprint for Free Speech and prior with Transparency International, I've participated in about 30 events and conferences that focused on whistleblower protection, and there are 4 more coming in the next 2 months. So with me being away from my family so long, my babysitting bills are unprecedented. But what of course is really important and impressive is the level of interest in this issue of whistleblowing is truly unprecedented, and I'll explain briefly why. On the part of NGOs, government officials, policymakers, academics, PhD students, the media, international and regional organizations such as the UN, the OECD, the Council of Europe, and the Organization of American States. At the UN ODC, the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, which gets requests from member countries for public policy and technical assistance, the number 3 most asked about topic is whistleblowing. The UN ODC gets dozens of requests every year from governments for help on writing whistleblower laws. In the last 5 years alone, about 20 countries have passed designated whistleblower laws, 20 in 5 years, and about 30 more in all regions of the world are considering new or improved laws. That's 1/4 of the world. 1/4 of the countries in the world taking action on this issue, which had been marginalized, of course, for decades or centuries. This is a truly transformative time, not just for our movement, but for the rights of everyone, everywhere. And of course, interest among activists is deepening, and not just whistleblower activists, and we have the top whistleblower activists in the world in this room, which is a great honor, but those who work on a whole range of issues that powerfully link up to and resonate with whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is not an isolated phenomenon. This is very important to know. This new generation of activists is building up from and reaching down to whistleblowing. They bring with them and are molded by the most powerful influences of our age: information and communication technologies, the dream of a borderless world, new renditions of public space and personal privacy, and ambitious expectations of government and corporate transparency and accountability. This is why we're here today. People want more transparency, more accountability. Whistleblowing is a product and a symptom of this. This new generation of activists is fueling the future of the whistleblower movement. It is incorporating whistleblowing into the critically interrelated fields of investigative journalism, and we'll hear from some of those folks this week: access to information, free speech, human rights, media and internet freedom, data privacy, and workers' rights, to name just a few. There's even a whistleblower platform for reporting environmental crimes called Wild Leaks, where people can securely and anonymously report poaching, trafficking, logging, and other wildlife offenses. So that's pretty cool. Next year is my 30th year working with whistleblowers. 30 years. As a journalist, a consumer protection activist, and now as a whistleblower protection advocate. I'll never forget one of the first whistleblowers who contacted me back in the 1980s, a police official who told me about corruption and drug dealing by the local police in a small town in Florida. The sheriff was protecting drug dealers as they came in on their boats at night along the coast of Florida, on the west coast of Florida, and allowing them to do their business. I met the whistleblower at an out-of-the-way restaurant. He drew a schematic diagram of the dirty cops and their drug gang connections on a cocktail napkin, which I don't have anymore, unfortunately. He told me to call him Deep Badge, as an homage to the famous Watergate whistleblower, Mark Felt. Deep Badge and many whistleblowers like him perform a public service every day, valuing the common good, the good of their community, and the good of their society above their own private security and sometimes above their own personal safety. Whistleblowers are doing their job, and I have always done my job as best as I could and still am today with the information they pass on to me, and very important, while honoring their individual needs and concerns, because they have them, obviously. Why do whistleblowers even need to do this for society? Why are they doing this job? Regulators, the people on whom the public depends to protect its interests, aren't doing enough. They can't, they won't, or they don't know how to. Corporations, especially those with a multinational or global reach, have also proven themselves unwilling or unable to protect the public interest or even to acknowledge that there is a public interest. To try to appease us, many large corporations set up dubious or even fake corporate governance and whistleblower programs that amount to little more than window dressing. Corporate governance becomes almost a contradiction in terms. My fellow journalist Ben Knight and I exposed such a questionable program at Siemens, the multinational engineering company, in an article published in 100 Reporters this past July, and you can see this article at 100r.org. We the people should not rely on the government and on the corporations anyway. That's not even democratic. It's not a democratic principle. It actually goes against the soul and the purpose and the mechanisms of democracy. Show me an example of a government or a corporation fixing their own problem on their own initiative, without any public or media pressure. Show me one. I'm sure it's happened sometime, somewhere in the world, but not nearly enough to justify a wait-and-see, hope-for-the-best attitude by citizens, voters, and employees, who are the whistleblowers, the people. Whistleblowers fill these gaps, these massive gaps, where the people in charge of our world can't or won't get the job done. We hear whistleblower stories every day. We see their faces on the news, we hear their stories, but not enough, not nearly enough, do we hear about their contributions toward a better world. The impact whistleblowers make and that their disclosures make is hardly ever talked about in a systematic way. There have been no comprehensive studies or research on this, as far as I know, to take all these stories and look at the impacts. To help work on this, my organization, Blueprint for Free Speech, is starting a 2-year project funded by the European Union that will document these positive contributions. And naturally, we're pleased to share our findings with everyone in the whistleblower community and the broader public. Excuse me. These contributions by whistleblowers are often more influential than what the regulators themselves are able to achieve. Research by the top accounting firms, KPMG and so forth, shows that 1/3 of all corporate fraud cases, worldwide are exposed by whistleblowers and tipsters. This is more than auditors, security staff, and the police combined. It makes you wonder what auditors, security staff, and police do with their time. Let's now look at a few real-life examples of how whistleblowers, regular people like you and me, not heroes or martyrs, expose crimes and misconduct that led to huge impacts, positive impacts, in our institutions, our society, and in our world. Now, I'm not going to rattle down a boring list of these people, but I'm going to describe the cases. Some of these cases you have already read about, but you hear bits and pieces. You hear a snippet, it's on the back page of a business section somewhere. So what we've done here with my colleague Veronica Nod in the audience here is to put together a more comprehensive review about the impacts made by individual people. And it's very ironic that whistleblower stories come down to the whistleblower, or why did they do it? The whistleblower comes under the microscope, and whether they are protected or not. Well, I make a silly joke. Whistleblowers don't blow the whistle to be protected. They blow the whistle to make an impact in the world. So here's some, just a very few cases where this has happened. Bradley Birkenfeld worked at UBS Bank and reported on unfair and deceptive business practices, which led to a massive, massive, massive fraud investigation against UBS and other banks for enabling tax evasion by wealthy interests in the U.S. Birkenfeld himself was involved with the wrongdoing because he was helping one of his own clients at the bank evade taxes. He was arrested and put in prison for about 3 years. But while he was in prison, the whistleblower office in the United States for the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, gave him a $104 million, 104 with 6 zeros, dollar award for exposing the massive scheme. Now, just to make it clear as an aside, not all U.S. whistleblowers get money. It's a very, and I'm sure Tom can explain this later, but it's only for certain kinds of whistleblowers under very specific cases, and it's not easy to get. So, you know, the illusion that U.S. whistleblowers are all doing it for the money is not totally correct. Like him or not, and I would argue that this is far beyond the point, whether you like him or not, it's hard to overstate the impact of Birkenfeld's disclosures. In 2013, Switzerland signed the Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters. I'm sure there's an acronym, but I don't know what it is, which is an international tax treaty that promotes the exchange of tax data among 60 countries. This represented a major rollback of Switzerland's historic status as a tax haven for offshore assets and rich people who don't want to pay their fair share. The Swiss media credited Birkenfeld's act with effecting a sea change in Swiss banking. One newspaper said Birkenfeld was a blessing for the Swiss financial industry. His revelations helped accelerate the industry's transition away from its reliance on dirty money by dooming the bank secrecy laws that enabled tax evasion in the first place. Now, what did they do in response to what this one person did? Fraud investigations were launched against UBS and the individual tax evaders, the individual people, the rich people, in the US and France. UBS was fined $780 million in the US, and for some reason, the bank got what's called a deferred prosecution agreement, where they don't have to plead guilty to a crime. So that's handy. You and I don't have that benefit. normally. UBS also paid a $200 million fine to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and this is the blowout fact right here, $400 million in missing taxes was recovered by U.S. authorities. Tax cheats had to pay their fair share. And this is also quite cool, previously privileged information, previously secret information on 4,500 tax evaders in the U.S. was released. The total amount recovered by the government, based on Birkenfeld's disclosures, $5 billion, 5 with a B, 5 with 9 zeros. Just by purpose of analogy, if this much money, $5 billion, was recovered by Czech authorities in this country, what could they do with it? This is real. There's an expression, a billion here, a billion there, eventually adds up to real money. This would be enough money to keep the Charles University here in Prague, with its 51,000 students, 8,000 professors and staff, and its world-class natural sciences, humanities, and linguistics departments up and running for 16 years. So if you had a strong whistleblower law in Czech Republic and you caught one of these dirty banks, the money goes right into your budget. Maybe have cheaper tuition over there, I don't know. After Birkenfeld came forward, Stephanie Gibault also reported tax evasion and laundering by UBS with complicity of the UBS's French subsidiary or office. I know Stephanie. She's a wonderful, wonderful human being. Great, great person. She was harassed, excluded, discriminated against, and fired in 2012 because her boss wanted her to erase her hard drive. And she said, forget about it, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to erase my hard drive. So she was fired. The impact of this case is still unfolding. But in 2013, UBS was fined in France 100 million euros. This is real money. This is huge, huge money. And at a time when we have a financial crisis, governments are having to close schools, daycare centers, cut health care. This is real money. And I think the time that we are questioning the motives of whistleblowers and money needs to end. This is real. This is an income source, whistleblowing. The biggest such fine ever allowed under French law, 100 million euros, UBS was fined just because they lacked the internal controls. Not even for the crime, but just because they didn't do their business the right way, they got fined. Other investigations are still ongoing. And in a really, really important case in March this year, a French labor court ruled in Stephanie's favor. The bank was found guilty of labor harassment. And she got actually a rather paltry 30,000 euros for her suffering. I'm just going to, I have 4 more. I'm not going to go through all 4 right now. But I will talk about one that was interesting in Liechtenstein, where a computer technician, Heinrich Kiba, at LGT Bank, took documents from the bank that he was digitizing in the archive. I don't know why, but he sold the information on 1,400 bank customers to Germany's Federal Intelligence Services, because there were rich people in Germany were stashing the money in Liechtenstein, and he was working to I guess copy or scan, digitize the account information, and he's like, whoa, what's going on here? He was sentenced to prison. The guy exposed massive crimes and tax evasion. He went to jail, or at least they tried to send him to jail for 4 years. And he fought it, and eventually got reduced to probation. This is very similar to the story, and as far as I could tell, maybe I'm wrong, but none of the tax evaders have gone to prison. There was one person in Germany that got a suspended sentence, which means you don't have to go. But he was the only one sentenced to prison. It's very similar to the case of John Kiriakou. Maybe people might know that name. John Kiriakou was a whistleblower in the U.S. who exposed the waterboarding, the torture people being held by U.S. authorities. John went to prison for 2 or 2.5 years. None of the torturers went. I mean, we need to get good whistleblower laws. The laws that are being passed don't work. Someone who exposed torture, waterboarding, brutal, illegal, by any stretch, illegal under the Geneva Convention, 100% illegal. The person who exposed that goes to prison, but none of the torturers went to prison. None of the people who ordered it, who supervised it, who carried it out. George Bush, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, nobody went to prison but the man who exposed it. So the Heinrich Kieber is a very similar case where the whistleblower becomes the story. Take the attention off the bad guys. This case involving this Liechtenstein bank led to investigations in 14 countries, including the largest tax evasion investigation ever in Germany. But he goes to jail. We want him to go to jail. He's the bad guy. There have been investigations of at least 600 people in Germany, including the CEO of the German post company, Deutsche Post, Klaus Zumwinkel, who was forced to resign in 2008. Lawsuits all over the place against the bank in the US, UK, Netherlands, Australia, on and on and on. And similar to the US, which recovered $400 million in hidden taxes, unpaid taxes, Germany has recovered 626 million euros from rich people in Germany who didn't pay their taxes. And now there's, like in Switzerland, there's a massive pressure to have Liechtenstein end its role as a tax haven. I'm not going to go through all the details, but another case is Hervé Falciani, the HSBC whistleblower. Again, tax evasion by a Swiss bank. It became known as the Lagarde list, the list of bank account holders that he released, especially in Greece, which led to huge, massive investigations all over the place. Finally, in June of this year, Switzerland fined, this doesn't sound like a very high fine. How could that be a record fine? How could 43 million be a record fine? Anyway, HSBC got fined $43 million by the Swiss authorities in June. Say Swiss authorities 3 times fast. Richard Bowen exposed the subprime mortgage scandal where the banks were gambling in these shady home loans. He exposed that, of course was ignored and fired. Citibank was fined quite a lot of money. And then the anonymous LIBOR whistleblower. LIBOR is the interest rate that banks pay when they loan money or borrow money from each other, whatever they do in their fancy offices. There was an anonymous whistleblower who exposed manipulation of the LIBOR interest rate, which was costing the global economy $17.1 billion because of the manipulation of this interest rate. And he received immunity from prosecution. Why would you prosecute the guy? It doesn't make any sense. You can't do that. So he got immunity from prosecution by turning in his fellow conspirators. The impact of that has been massive. Investigations against banks from here to Tuesday, you name it, the Hall of Fame, Citi, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, Barclays, JP Morgan, all under investigation. Fines so far, this is an eye-opener. The fines so far in this case, 7.2 billion euros, including in the US, UK, and Netherlands. Now here in the Czech Republic, of course, is the very well-known story of Libor Mikalik, who needs no introduction. Mr. Mikalik exposed 2 national scandals, becoming one of the most influential whistleblowers in the country's history. In 1996, he exposed embezzlement related to a tunneling project, embezzlement related to a tunneling project. And in 2010, he blew the whistle on a scam by the Environment Ministry to inflate a public water project by $120 million and siphon the money to a political party. In that case, as most people should be aware, the Environment Minister, Mr. Mikalik had audio taped an advisor to the Environment Minister, and after that came out, he had to resign. course, Mr. Mikalik is the recipient of numerous anti-corruption awards, and of course now is serving in the Senate from the Pirate Party. And just 2 years ago, he sponsored a national whistleblower protection law, which did not pass. These are just a few, and I didn't want to go through a laundry list, and if that's boring, I apologize, but just to grasp the full magnitude of what these people do shows you how strong your law has to be. It really, really has to work. And I'm not sure tweaking is going to do it. You need a really, really good law that's going to cover every eventuality and not force the person to suffer retaliation before getting relief. The person should be able to get immediate administrative protection right when the retaliation starts. But what nearly all of these cases have in common, this is a really important point, is the fact that simply making a disclosure usually isn't enough. And I learned this from Tom Devine from Gap here in the front row. Pressure must be applied from the outside, from the media, from activists, from NGOs, from citizens, from elected officials who still care, from government officials who still have some courage. Just blowing the whistle and saying the law protects me isn't enough. This is what whistleblowers have to do to get justice. Only from this outside pressure, creating a village, creating a circle of protection around the whistleblower, can the whistleblower be protected and vindicated if his or her name becomes public. And only with this pressure to elected officials, regulators, law enforcement, will the mess be cleaned up and the guilty parties brought to justice. So it's almost like we need a second layer of whistleblowers. You need a whistleblower to blow the whistle on the fact that there's been no action taken because of what the first whistleblower said. There was a really incredible story in Bosnia, where I visit quite often, where a guy who worked at the tax office exposed some corruption in the tax office. He got fired, so on and so forth. He only got his job back because the prosecutor threatened to fine the head of the tax office if he didn't get him his job back. And it got into the papers, and the NGOs got involved. The guy got his job back the next day, only because of a threat of fining, of a monetary fine, personal monetary fine, and pressure from outside. And another important point is that something seems to happen when authorities receive information and evidence from a whistleblower. The information isn't quite treated the same as regular information on a crime report, or if police discover the information on their own. The evidence from the whistleblower it's dirty, it's tainted, it's not clean, it's from a whistleblower, I don't want to pay any attention to that. We don't really know why that is, but it's true. There's anecdotal evidence that it's true. The whistleblower disclosures don't get a fair shake when it goes to the authorities. It may be that the stereotypes and misconceptions of the whistleblowers also get extended to the information, that the whistleblower's tainted, the information's tainted, I don't want to touch it. So even the disclosure is put on trial, just like the whistleblowers are. Today, I'm going to put my activist hat back on again. Today there are international networks of whistleblower researchers and NGOs, dozens of whistleblower hotline services, PhD dissertations, Hollywood movies on the subject, Nobel Peace Prize nominations for whistleblowers, and statues of famous whistleblowers being erected in public places, like in Berlin. Quietly but firmly, whistleblower protection laws are beginning to work. And this also isn't news in the newspapers because it's good news and it's not a scandal, but people are being reinstated all over the world. A tax department official in Bosnia, like I mentioned, a bank executive in Nigeria, a waste disposal worker in South Korea, a mental health caregiver in Ireland, an electronics salesman in Japan, and a justice ministry employee in South Africa known only as Mrs. M. got her job back, thanks to the media and the whistleblower law there. I think it's important to figure out why you want to pass a whistleblower law in this country. A lot of countries do it to make donors happy, make the EU happy, make the media happy. It's kind of like an easy feel-good, like a quick fix. Easy feel-good, oh, we passed a whistleblower law, isn't that great? Stick it in a drawer. I mean, I know that's not going to happen here. I know you're going to pass a good law, it's going to work, people are going to care about it, it's going to get attention, there's a commitment. But we thought that in the UK, and this is my last point. We thought that in the UK, which passed the Public Interest Disclosure Act, PIDA, P-I-D-A, in 1998, 17 years ago. Turns out, in their excitement to protect whistleblowers, they left out any whistleblower protection. The law doesn't protect whistleblowers. It doesn't do it. But everybody thinks it's the greatest law in the world. Oh, the UK PIDA, it's the best. It doesn't have any legal protections whatsoever. And we're going to release a report later this year that documents this. So, if I can say this politely, if the Czech Republic is looking at a whistleblower bill, I would not recommend reading the UK bill. It simply does not have legal protections for whistleblowers. You have to be retaliated against, fired, harassed, beaten up, excluded, your lock on your door changed, your email account blocked, you name it. And then you get to go to court with your lawyer, which you have to pay for, and pay €1,000, £1,000 to get access to the court, and then maybe you get some money back. Doesn't work. So because of the gaping holes in the UK law, and I trust that the government people here have looked at the UK law, because everybody does, it actually invites retaliation rather than prevents it. Everyone involved with this effort in this room and in this campaign, if you keep your eyes on the prize, we're going to get there, and we're going to make it. And we're going to have a whistleblower protection law that not just one that you're proud of, but one that actually does what it's supposed to do. 6 quick points. Number 1, give employees complete access to safe and reliable disclosure channels of their choosing. They can call whoever they want with the information and report it, to report corruption, crime, and misconduct. Number 2, complete loophole-free protections from all types of retaliation, including physical harm. Number 3, penalties for people who retaliate against whistleblowers, and higher fines and higher sanctions for repeat offenders. In the US, we have this thing called 3 strikes and you're out, a baseball reference. You commit 3 violent crimes, you go to prison for life. What if if a corporation retaliates against whistleblowers 3 times in a row, they have to come under government scrutiny or government investigation for systematic problems. So more countries are having penalties for retaliation. It's like in Bosnia, and like I said, when the government official was threatened with a fine in Bosnia, personally threatened with a fine, the whistleblower got his job back the next day. Money talks, and the other thing walks. Number 4, the guarantee that all valid disclosures will be investigated, and the results of these investigations made public. Number 5, that guilty parties will face justice. This is the problem. In some polls, it's not the fear of retaliation, it's the fear that nothing's going to happen as a result of the disclosure. Why am I going to risk my job or my life if the bad guy's not going to go to jail? That's why people blow the whistle. That's why they do it. And to make sure that the guilty parties do not walk away from their crimes with the help of their political and business cronies. And finally, number 6, that all necessary corrective actions and policy reforms will be taken to deter the misconduct from happening again. Close the circle. Fix the problem. This is the prize. This is the dream. This is the law that every country needs. And we owe it more than ever to the people who step forward while others stand back. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. You know why? Because it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you very much.